In this chapter, we're going to be studying how to make decisions using if statements. We're going to start out in this first lesson by looking at the way we make comparisons, and that's using what are called the comparison or relational operators. So let's take a look at those. We're going to do it in this lesson in the interactive shell. So we'll start that first. So the first of the operators is the equals operator, or is equal to. And it's a very simple one. It's a double equal sign. You'll notice that we put two values on either side, so we call it a binary operator because it needs a left-hand side and a right-hand side. And so we compare two values to see if they're equal. So clearly 100 is equal to 100, so it returns true. So the relational operators return a Boolean value, either true or false. So for example, 100 equals 200 will return false. It works just as well with strings. Hello equals hello, returns true. Hello equals goodbye, equals false. And then finally, hello equals hello with a capital H returns false because these two strings are not exactly the same. So after equality, we have greater than, 100 greater than 1 returns true. A greater than B returns false because B is actually greater than A in what's called lexicographic order, as you see there. Then we have greater than or equal to, so 100 greater than or equal to 100 returns true. A greater than or equal to B returns false. Then we have less than, 100 less than 1 returns false. 0 less than 100 returns true. H less than H returns false. And A less than B returns true. Next is less than or equal to, so we have 1 less than or equal to 1 returns true. B less than or equal to C returns true. 100 less than or equal to 1 returns false. And then finally, we have not equal to. 100 not equal to 1 returns true. Hello not equal to hello returns false. So those are the relational operators, at least the ones that we'll be studying in this chapter. We have is equal to, greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, and not equal to. And the thing we have to remember about the relational operators is they are binary operators, so they require two operands, and they return a Boolean value. So with that in mind, we're ready to move to the next lesson where we're going to be talking about ways to combine relational expressions. So for example, hello equals to hello is a relational expression. We have another set of operators called the logical or Boolean operators that allow us to combine two or more relational expressions and return a single Boolean value from those expressions. And we're going to look at those operators in the next lesson. Often in a program, you'll have more than one comparison to make, and those comparisons will be related to each other. When that occurs, you need to use what are called the logical operators. And we're going to start off by looking at how the logical operators work generally, and then we'll look at some specific Python examples. The logical operators are and, or, and not. And what you're seeing in front of you are the truth tables for the logical or Boolean operators. So let's take a look at the AND truth table first. AND is the first of the logical operators. And in the headings, you see relational expression 1, RE1, relational expression 2, RE2, and result. And this table demonstrates what occurs when two relational expressions, RE1 and RE2, are combined using the AND logical operator. So for example, if RE1 is true and RE2 is true, then the complete expression RE1 and RE2 is true. Then you'll see if RE1 is true and RE2 is false, then the whole expression is false. If RE1 is false and RE2 is true, the result is still false. And then finally, if RE1 is false and RE2 is false, then of course the result is false. Now let's move down and look at the OR truth table. Here we see that if RE1 and RE2 are true, then the result is true. If RE1 is true and RE2 is false, the result is still true. If RE1 is false and RE2 is true, the result is true. And only if RE1 is false and RE2 is false is the whole expression false. And then finally, although we're not going to look at it in this lesson, is the not truth table. Not simply negates a Boolean value. So for example, not true is false and not false is true. There are programming situations where we need not, but for this particular lesson, we're only going to look at and or. So now that we've seen how they work theoretically, let's look at a couple of simple examples of and or, and we'll see them again later in the lessons. So we're going to bring up the Python shell. So the first thing we're going to do is create a couple of variables, and I'm going to demonstrate how and works using these two variables. So we have hours worked equals 39, salary equals 39,000. So we might have a payroll program that will have the relational expressions hours worked greater than 40 and salary less than or equal to 50,000. In other words, this is how we probably pay overtime based on whether or not a worker has worked over 40 hours in that pay period for a week and their salary is less than or equal to 50,000. So you see that's false, and it's false because hours worked is not greater than 40, it's actually less than 40. So this first expression, hours worked greater than 40, is false, so that makes the complete expression false. All right, let's look at another example, this time using or. So here we're going to write a password program, actually just a very small fragment. We're going to set our password equal to guest, uppercase guest. Then we're going to look and see what the user enters for their password. And here we're going to say if they entered guest as lowercase or they entered it as uppercase, then that will be okay. So the way we do that is by using the logical operator or, saying the password can be equal to lowercase guest or the password can be equal to all uppercase, which is what it's set to. So if we hit enter, we see that's true. So that's how the logical operators work. I guess I can show you not real quick just to demonstrate how it works. We can say not 100 equals 100, and that will return false because 100 equals 100 is true. So not true is false. And then we could say something like not 100 less than 1. That returns true because, of course, the relational expression is false and not false is true. So those are the logical operators. And like I said earlier, we will be working with them more as we demonstrate how the if statements work. In this lesson, we're going to look at the first of 3 different types of if statements, and we're going to call this the simple if. So I'm going to use Notepad here, kind of like a whiteboard. So the way we form a simple if in Python is we write the keyword if followed by a relational expression. After the relational expression, we put a colon. The colon signifies that we're now ready to start the body of the if. The body of the if has to be indented, a couple of spaces, 2 or 3, up to tab. I don't like to use tab, but you can use tab. And then inside the indentation is where you'll put Python statements of any type. Of course, you can also have more than one relational expressions. You could have RE1 followed by a logical operator followed by the statements. And then, of course, you could have RE1 or RE2 followed by the statements. The way the if statement works is that the relational expression is tested. If the relational expression is true, then the statements inside the body, in other words, indented from the if, are executed. And they're only executed if the relational expression is true. So in the next 2 examples, the whole statement must be true, just like with the or, must be true in order for the statement or statements to be executed. And that's all there is to it. So let's look at an example in Python. So let's minimize that, bring up our window, clear the screen. We'll work in Python 3.0 this time. We're going to write a script for this. We're not going to do it interactively. So we're going to call this ifstatement.py. Let me adjust it on the screen here just a bit. There we go. All right. So to demonstrate how the if statement works, we're going to write a simple little payroll program. So we'll ask the user to enter the number of hours worked. Then we'll store it in a variable, hours worked. We'll assign the rate, although we could ask for the rate also. Just to make this program a little simpler, I'll assign the rate. Now here's where our if statement comes in. Here we say if hours worked is greater than 40, followed by the colon. Then I drop down to the next line and I indent. Then I'll say gross pay is equal to 40 hours times the rate of pay plus the number of hours worked minus 40 times the rate times 1.5 to represent time and a half. If, on the other hand, the hours worked is less than or equal to 40, then gross pay is equal to the hours worked times the rate. Just as simple as that. And then we can print gross pay. And remember, to concatenate a numeric value, we have to convert it to string. So we'll convert it to string to display it. So there's our program or script. So let's exit and save. Then we'll run our script. So it says here in the hours worked, let's enter 45. And then it computes the gross pay. Let's run it again. This time, let's set the hours worked to 20. And 20 times 25 is 500. So that's correct. So looking at the program again one more time, we see how the if statement worked. The program looks at this relational expression and decides whether it's true or false. If it's true, then it executes the statement below. Otherwise, it does nothing. Then it moves down to the next if statement and analyzes this relational expression. If hours worked is less than or equal to 40, then it executes this statement instead. It's possible that we really don't need to have two relational expressions tested because either hours worked is greater than 40 or it's less than or equal to 40. So in that case, we want to use the second version of the if statement called the if-else statement, and we're going to see how to do that in the next lesson. In the last lesson, we saw how to write a simple if statement, and the example that we used was a payroll example where we performed one calculation if the number of hours worked was greater than 40, and then we had a separate if statement that checked to see if the number of hours worked were less than or equal to 40, in which case yet another calculation was performed. Having two if statements related like that is usually not necessary. What you can do instead is write what's called an if-else statement. And let's take a look at the abstract version of that. Then we'll go back into the program from last lesson and modify it using an if-else. The way you write the if-else is you have the if, followed by the relational expression, followed by the set of statements that'll be executed. Then you have else, followed by a colon, followed by the set of statements that you want to have executed, if the if part of the statement is false. So in other words, here's how the if-else statement works. The relational expression is tested. If it's true, then the statements in the body of the if are executed and control falls outside of the else, to where my cursor is, in other words. If the relational expression is false, then the statements after the else are automatically executed and then control falls down out of the if-else. So one set of statements is executed if the relational expression is true. A second set of statements is executed if the relational expression is false. But by doing it this way, we don't have to write a separate if that would be covered in this case by the else. All right, so let's go back and look at the program from before. It was if statement.py. And all we have to do to modify that is take out the if and replace it with an else. So now we're saying if hours worked is greater than 40, execute this statement. Otherwise, else, execute this statement. So let's exit and save and then run the program and see what it does. So we'll type if statement.py. So let's do it where the if is true. Now let's run it again. And this time let's run it with the else. So we get the very same result as we got before, but we do it without having to actually perform yet a second relational expression test. In other words, we don't have to test to see if hours worked is less than or equal to 40. If this expression is false, then execution is transferred immediately to the statement inside the else and it's executed. So now we've seen two of the three types of if statements, the if else, and now the third type, which is performed if we have several relational expressions to test. And that's called the if elif, and we're going to see how to do that in the next lesson.